Good afternoon. My name is John Lochner. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Billy Jones Wildcat Railroad. And we're here to bring you some history and information regarding the Billy Jones Wildcat Railroad, how it got started, what's a little bit of the history of railroads in Los Gatos. And I'm proud to have two great people with me. One is the current president of the Billy Jones Railroad, Kelly Locke, and the other one is Ken Middlebrook. Ken is our historian. So if you want to know anything about the history of the railroad, he's got it, believe me. And we'd like to start this program with maybe just introducing them. Kelly, would you tell us a little bit about you? Well, wait a minute. Let me tell you a little bit about me.
Yeah. Fair is fair.
My first involvement in Billy Jones Railroad was in the 60s. I moved to Los Gatos in 1960, and I had 5 children. I lived close by, up bordering Montecito, and as my kids grew older, I can recall Sunday morning events that took place. Along about 11 o'clock in the morning, my kids would come running to me and say, Daddy, Billy Jones is running. Can we go? Can we go? And I said, oh boy, okay, let's pile in the car. So we piled into the station wagon, the 5 of us, and we go down to the railroad. And that time it was on Dave's Avenue, running through an orchard. So that was my first experience with Billy Jones Railroad. I've had a number of experiences since that time, but I'd like to pass this on now over to Kelly to tell us how he got started.
Thank you, John. Well, I moved into the San Jose area, Los Gatos, San Jose area about 1962, and knew nothing of the railroad or its existence. And a friend of mine in high school was a Boy Scout, and his troop was coming down to Los Gatos Oak Meadow Park in 1969, and they were charged with laying track in the station area of this new railroad. So I hung along with them, came down, and learned the tough job of laying track and driving spikes. Not something that I think I ever want to do again, but it was definitely a good experience. And about a year later, after the railroad opened in 1970, I had a friend of mine approach me and ask me if I needed a job, a school-time job. And so in September of 1970, I actually started working as an employee at Billy Jones, a crossing guard conductor, and moved on from there to engineer and board member, and now I serve as
you
the
said a crossing guard. It's a new railroad, so where was the crossing?
There was only one manned crossing at the time, and it was right on the east west,
next to the depot.
Next to the depot, the west side of Vasona Creek.
Los Gatos
Creek, yeah, well, whatever it is. Yeah. But anyway,
the big waterway.
Yeah, the water. But as the train left the station, it would cross this crossing which was a pedestrian pathway, and we didn't have gates at the time. We had to stand with our arms out facing the public, as if we're going to stop somebody. But it was just a visual aid to tell them to stop as the train was going by. And then there was a second crossing on the other side of the creek in a county park, and that was unmanned. So we relied on the whistle and bell of the locomotive to advise customers.
Well, one thing about at that time, Kelly, is the trees were like small.
So yes, they were.
when you would cross the creek there, you had so much visibility from the train that you could actually see pedestrians going back and forth across that walkway. And also at that time, just me being the historian, is that's before the Los Gatos Creek Trail was completed. And so at that time, really the only people that were on that second or both paths were park visitors, rather than now currently, that
so
trail is a regional park.
How far did the train travel at that time?
The initial track, which was opened up in 1970, was only a third of a mile. It simply went across the creek and around what we call Squirrel Hill, which is just it's an unmonitored, unmaintained pile of dirt out in the middle of
with a lot of squirrel holes.
Oh, there is. That's why we call it Squirrel Hill. Yes.
Yeah.
But it wasn't more than about 2 years later. The biggest complaint about the railroad was it wasn't long enough, and so we had an expansion project, and we added another 2/3 track going around a large grass field in the county park.
So there are two contracts then that the railroad had. One is with the town of Los Gatos to operate in Oak Meadow Park, and then the other one is the contract with the county to operate through Vasona Park, correct?
There's actually a third contract. The water district. The water district controls Los Gatos Creek. And so we actually have 3 contracts. You look at me surprised, but yes, to being the historian, I looked at the records that we had to get an agreement with the water district to be able to cross the creek with the bridge. So 3
Originally, yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. The currently the only 2 contracts in existence are with the county and the town of Los Gatos for the land use.
Right.
They're a 10-year renewable lease currently.
Yeah.
Well, I think for the bridge that was probably an easement that probably for 99 years or something like that. But
So
there
there
was a third contract.
My understanding, there are 2 bridges that the train goes across.
One is a bridge, one is a trestle.
Okay.
And a trestle is, it looks like a bridge, but it's over a land obstruction. In this case, it's
Like
a wash, small wash,
Okay.
and it's in the county park, and that was built in-house. We constructed that ourselves. Initially, or in 1971, we constructed that in order to go around this large grass field. The bridge that goes across the creek is actually a salvaged flat car from a full-size train, and we acquired it, built 2 cement pilings on either side of the creek, and then a large crane came in and picked it up off of a flatbed truck and set it in place, and that is currently our crossing over the.
Yeah, I remember that. Bill Mason was the president, and he was active with the railroad for years and years, and very instrumental in putting together a board of directors, which we'll talk about later. But I can recall Bill acquiring this flatbed and coming in on a big crane and bringing that and setting it in place. It was a landmark decision for the railroad to finally have some beautiful bit of track going over the creek, and that completed all the rest of the track. So it's still there to this day, and we still have in winter storms we have water rising in the creek up to that bridge, and I've seen logs piled against that bridge. So that really protects the railroad.
That is very true. And I'm going to circle back around now, and I'm going to hand it off to Ken and ask him to tell how he got started with the railroad.
All right.
So I grew up in Cupertino, and I've always been a train nut. One of my the first pictures of me at that Christmas, my first Christmas, 6 months old, and I'm on the floor with the toy train next to the tree. And so I've always been a train nut. And my father, for some reason, we never even knew we knew that the railroad existed at Billy's Ranch in Los Gatos. We never had an opportunity to go see it, to actually ride it. That's one of my regrets is I never saw it personally, the ranch. But in 1969, there was an advertisement similar to the Boy Scouts. There was a lot of media newspapers, basically it was mostly newspapers at the time, promoting the fact that the railroad was going to be reborn and down at, the town's Oak Meadow Park. And so my father got involved at that point, and he befriended Myron Alexander, and he built the track. And so myself as I was probably in grade school at the time, that I was a kid, running around in the roundhouse and climbing on the old caboose that was back in there. And so that's how I was involved at that time. John, it's funny you mentioned the bridge coming in. I remember that day because that bridge was it's an 80-foot long bridge, and to get it into the park, they actually had to lift it over the trees to get it, to set it down in place. And so it was a rather momentous day for the railroad, but it's nice that I was there. I remember that as a 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, seeing that occur. And to think that the bridge has been with us for 50 years, and who knows how many. We must be over 2 million riders at this time.
Oh, I would think so easily. Yes.
So that's the railroad opened in 1970. I remember that day, July 26, 1970, 2 days before my 8th birthday. So I have vivid memories of that. Actually, my 8th birthday was 2 days later, and we had my birthday party right there at Pond 1, just kind of behind the roundhouse. And so that's how I got initially involved with the railroad as a little kid, with my father's involvement. My father was very interested in construction, and so when the railroad was built, he really wasn't interested in running the train per se. There were several people who asked him, "Hey, why don't you become an engineer and stay involved?" And that really wasn't his interest, because he was involved with the railroad because it was my interest, and also he enjoyed trains, or still enjoys trains, but it was really my interest. And so we I as a young kid, I really couldn't get back to the railroad, living in Cupertino, a little far for a bike ride. Well, in 1980, the railroad had their 10th anniversary of being open, and at that point, they invited all the old volunteers that they could find from 1969, 1970, and so that included my family. And so I attended that 10th anniversary, and by that time I was just out of high school and 18, and Randy Jones came up to me. Randy Jones remembered me as a runt kid down there at the park and said, "Hey, do you want to get involved with the railroad?" And that's like a dream, considering that I've always loved trains, and the number 2 has always been a sweet spot on my heart. I think everybody around this table. And so to have someone say, "Hey, want to get involved?" Yes. So I got involved, laying track, hard work, and learned how to start running the steam engine in 1980. And then a couple years later, I served as a manager for the railroad while I finished my degree from San Jose State. And so so I've been involved nearly my whole life with the railroad in one form or another. And so it's just part of our heart.
We've got a railroad. I mean, we've got a lot of track, and we've got an engine. It takes some people to run this. Tell us a little bit about the engineers and how the train runs. How many people does it take to run a train?
Well, if you have a lot of money, it doesn't take that many. We rely heavily on volunteer labor. And every Tuesday we have an army of people that show up to do maintenance, not only on the locomotives, the cars, but also the buildings, the track, the garden, everything. And that's actually, we have one paid employee full-time who is over all of our equipment, which is what I was just speaking of. And he has actually broadened that where it's not just a Tuesday workday anymore. We have like Hope Services shows up one day of the week. I believe it's Wednesday, and they come out and just, whatever, take care of leaves or painting or whatever they may be. And there's other groups that have now shown up on other weekdays. So huge volunteer force. All of our engineers, which also fall under this equipment manager.
How many engineers do we have?
I'm saying probably about 30 at this particular point in various
30
stages.
people that are qualified to operate both the steam and
No. They're all in various stages of qualification.
Okay.
But they all start on our diesels, diesel engines. We have 2 of them, and they get their feet wet. They understand the railroad. They understand how it operates, safety, how to work with the employees in the station, how to view the public in the park, and to be able to safely operate the train, to keep both the passengers safe and the public safe. And then once are comfortable with that, then they move on to our number 2 engine, which is the oldest of all of our steam engines, all of our engines.
That's the beauty.
And
there.
that's a picture of it up there on the wall. That's the original. And once they get in that training mode, then again they have to learn the intricacies of running a steam engine, which is totally different than our 2 diesel engines. It takes a lot more concentration, a lot more forethought, a lot more thinking ahead of the curve.
Yeah. How many hours would you think are involved in someone becoming qualified as an engineer?
That's a tough one.
Can I answer that
Okay.
for Kelly? I don't think it's really the number of hours as comfort level. There's a lot of responsibility with, as Kelly mentioned, it's a little bit more complicated than the diesel locomotives. And so there's some people who will pick it up in 30 hours or so. There's some people who need 300 hours. It really depends on the comfort level of the individual.
I've always thought about the steam engine as a bomb that's under control.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
I really want to say safety's first. Safety is always paramount in terms of no matter what you do, whether or not it's a diesel locomotive or steam locomotive or just moving the cars around. This is not a toy train set. That the cars themselves can hurt people severely if they're not handled properly. If someone were to be caught between the 2 cars, that can cause some damage. So it's always safety. Learning. It's the locomotive. Yes, you have an operating boiler here, but it's like any other machine that you have to learn how to operate it properly. That you want.
So they are basically licensed by the railroad board to operate.
Yes.
Internal licensing, yes. We have a hierarchy of seasoned engineers that go through a sign-off process. And currently that is our safety program administrator, Brandon McCracken, is a primary signature. And then I am serving as the secondary signature. They need 2 signatures to operate any of our locomotives, whether it's a diesel or steam. Their training can be done with any of our engineers, but the final sign-off is internal, and it's done by Brandon and myself currently.
Yeah, it's as I mentioned, the locomotives is learning how to properly operate a machine, and you want to get the most efficiency and safety-wise in terms of operating. So I think those of us of training and looking at these people, we're looking at their comfort level in terms of do they have the knowledge to be able to properly adjust the various knobs and valves and whatnot, so to get that performance from the locomotive. And so
in addition to the engineers, Are they paid employees?
There are. We have.
I mean, engineers.
There are paid engineers, but that's I'll say a last resort. And the reason I say that is because during the summer months, we're open 7 days a week.
Yeah.
A lot of our volunteer engineers have jobs, and they cannot help us Monday through Friday. So we rely on those volunteers that are retired to run the engine Monday through Friday. It's typically a diesel, but it could be steam. And if we can't find one, then we resort to paid engineers, which are some of our returning college-age kids who have been trained to operate the diesel locomotives. Sometimes it could be one of our managers who is our manager staff is always trained to operate the engine so that they can step in an emergency. And so we do have some paid engineers, but we try very hard to utilize volunteer engineers on all cases.
Let's talk a little bit about the other personnel. We've talked about engineers and the work parties and that kind of thing. It takes other people to make this thing go. Let's start with the ticket office.
Well, let me back up one step. I mentioned our equipment manager. He's one of two managers that we have full-time. The other one is our operations manager. And that operations manager takes all of this equipment, the locomotives, the cars, and concession stand, and he provides that service to the customer, to the public. So he is responsible for hiring what we call seasonal employees, which we currently consider ourselves an entry-level job for high school students to introduce them to a work environment. So we're primarily focused on high school students coming into the workforce and learning how to handle money, how to handle customers, how to show up for work, to introduce them into the working world that they will be growing into in the near future. So many of the different areas that they work, one is the ticket booth. I think you mentioned that. And the ticket booth simply handles selling the tickets to the customer, as well as they handle our souvenir arena. We have a lot of souvenirs, hats, stickers, whistles, T-shirts, a lot of things in our souvenir shop, which is attached to the ticket booth. So when you come to buy a ticket, it's right there. You have the option of getting souvenirs. We also have concession. Our concession shop serves, hot dogs, hamburgers, snow cones, chips, cookies, ice cream, typical souvenir, or not souvenir, typical.
So what does it cost to ride the train?
Oh boy, you're going to change the subject again. Currently, John's got it all written down. I'm just in trouble.
No,
the current cost is $3 per ticket. 2 years and under rides free. Dogs ride free if you have your dog with you. Pets. But it's $3 a ticket, and if you happen to buy a group ticket, like you've got a large party there, you can get a group ticket of 30 or more tickets at $2 a ticket. So you save $1 off the ticket price. The tickets that you purchase, whether they're a $3 family ticket or whether it's a group ticket, do not expire. So you can, if you buy some group tickets and you don't use all of them for your birthday party or whatever it may be, you can bring them back at a later date and ride the train or carousel. We haven't talked about the carousel, but that'll be a different area.
Yeah. So now I have.
Can I say something about being a board member this year? I think that's something that we restarted this year is the community give back program. And I mentioned this both as a historian, is that something that Billy always did operating at the ranch is that he would have a pickle jar that he didn't charge for rides, but he would say, throw money into the till, you might say.
Oh, I put a lot of quarters in there.
A lot of quarters. And when there was a need in the community, whether it was a sick child or some sort of repair work done at a foster home or something like that, Billy would make donations out of that pickle jar. And so that was something that he always did. He's always giving back to the community. And this year, through the kind of nudging of Bill Yule's site, we started that community give back program. And, for this year, I think the last event that we had was supporting this KCAT in the organization. But in total for this year, we gave back $10,000 to community. And how that worked is that we would reserve a day that a portion of the ticket sale for a particular day was given directly to a local nonprofit here in Los Gatos. And I think that just for us to be able to do that says something about how the community values us, and we also value the community. So so that's our way of giving back. And I'll tell you, Kelly, that's one of my proudest moments. I mentioned it to friends on social media, and just the response that my friends are saying, isn't that terrific that your railroad can do that? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something that, once again, now the railroad has been involved at Oak Meadow for 50 years, but our history goes back far longer than that at Billy's Place. And so I just think it's really neat.
We talked about hiring the youth, the high school kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's my understanding that the Billy Jones Railroad employs the largest number of students of any organization in the county.
Possible. I don't have the numbers, but that is very possible.
Yeah. You give an idea of how many we're talking about?
Well, currently, there are a couple of college kids included in our seasonal employees, but we currently have 19 seasonal employees on the payroll right now. And I would say of that 19, probably 16 or 17 are high school students. The other 2 or 3 are college kids that came home for a summer job and stayed.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have 19 paid seasonal employees, and then we also have 3 paid seasonal managers, which on a regular basis they manage those 19 students in either the concession or ticket booth or carousel or conductor crossing guard. And then over the top of all of them is our one operations manager, and his focus is full time.
Are they hired to do one job, or are they
cross-trained? They're all cross-trained, and part of their training spectrum is I think it takes 5 days to go through the training spectrum. You sit at every location. You sit at every job. You do ticket sales one day. You do concession one day. You do the carousel one day. You do crossing. You do conductor, and then you start to move between those 5 positions regularly. And in order to be they call it you get your stripes when you complete your training. In order to get your stripes, you need to pass a test. It's a written test that goes over all of the rules and the procedures for each of those 5 areas. And at the end of that, they get a bump in pay as well when they pass that test.
And because they're serving food, they actually have to get a certificate from the county.
It's the county health department.
It's a written. I think they do it online.
They do it online, and they're paid to do that.
Right, yeah. but it's something that they have to do in addition to the training that
and
we
we're
provide
licensed
at the
by
park.
the health department.
Right,
it is. It's an online license that they have to apply and pass in order to serve food in the concession stand.
So we're licensed by the state for inspections.
As far as safety, it's an OSHA category through the state of California, and they come down annually to inspect our boilers and our operation and our paperwork.
Well, I think we've covered a lot here in introducing this to the train lovers in the community, as well as those people that want to know a little bit more about Billy Jones Wildcat Railroad. So I think we'll call that it for this session. And the next time, well, we got a lot to talk about. We could talk about railroads in Los Gatos.
We just scratched the surface of railroads in Los Gatos. Yes.
Kelly and Ken, thank you so much.
Thank you,
And we'll
John.
shut it down for today.
Thank you, John.